Welcome to BPH Crafts. I'm your host Heather, known as Bunnyfish on Ravelry, Instagram, and YouTube, and Heather Laws on Vero, which I haven't been on in about a week. This is episode 3 of the second season, and today is March 22nd, which is a Thursday. Grab some sticks and string and come sit with me. Today's outfit is brought to you by Families and Jammies, which is an event that my kids' school put on today. It was basically everybody wears their jammies to school, and then they had a half-hour period for parents to come in and read with their kids. So I had to split my time between my two, which was fine. My daughter read a book to me while I was reading a book to one of her friends, and then my daughter was still reading her book, and two of her friends started reading to me at the same time, which is fine because I can focus on that many things at once. So I was helping there. And then after 15 minutes, I went to my son's classroom and I read him a couple pages of one of my favorite books, and he read me a couple pages of it. So I'm just going to show you the books that I read this morning because it's exciting. So this is Not Quite Narwhal by Jessie, Simha, and it's about a unicorn who lives in the ocean and makes his way unexpectedly to the land. And then the other book is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine, which is my favorite book from middle school. And I probably would have read it in elementary school if it had been out then. And then on it is this cute little corner bookmark that my nephew made. He's made several for all of us. So anyway, knitting content. I finished 3 things this week, which is pretty decent. So first, I will show you hats. I finished this string band, which is a Stephen West pattern, and I don't know where my pin went. I did put in a progress keeper sort of deal for it, but I think I was somewhere down here. I was really close to being able to start this section, which is the first section in the pattern, but I did third. And then I picked up for the button band, and the buttons are not matching, but they are coordinating. They all came in the same button pack. I only had 6 of these, and I needed 9, so I only had 2 of these smaller buttons and then one that was slightly larger in that button pack, so I went with those. It has a drawstring to draw clothes as a hat, but it can also be used as a cowl, which is why I really like this pattern because you can wear it either way. Caught my glasses. And so you can wear it as a cowl, which is nice options, especially when it's really cold and you have multiple hats in your collection, but not so many cowls, or when you have multiple cowls and not so many hats. And then you pull that drawstring closed and you can tie it, and the pattern actually ties it around the hat after you have the hat on, but I pretty much never do that because I never make the strings long enough. I usually just tie it and throw the ties on the inside. But there is a string band, so that is, I think that's like Christmas project 3 or 4 done so far this year. The yarn that I used was Premier Serenity Sock yarn in the woodsy green colorway and the charcoal colorway. I'm super pleased with how this hat turned out. I kind of want to keep it for myself, but I didn't make it for myself, so I'll give it away. I do have more of each of these colors, so I theoretically could make myself one of these. I probably won't though because I don't enjoy making that pattern. It's for me it's kind of boring and tedious because I don't love garter stitch. But it's a perfectly lovely finished object. I'm just not a garter stitch person. I changed my mind. Now I'm going to show you this because it just makes sense to show it to you next. This is the barn raising square baby blanket that I have been working on for my son's speech therapist, and this is how it turned out. I used Burnett's what is this? Bernat Softy Babies, Ombres and Prints in the Little Trees colorway for the body. And then Red Heart Soft for the border. So I just did a barn raising square out, and then I did seed stitch for the border, and I used an Icord Bind Off. I did 20 rounds out of the border, basically enough so that it looks looked proportionally nice to me. I still do have more of this green, but I thought this was good, and I actually finished binding this off in the movie theater. This past week, I went and saw Love, Simon twice, and I really want to go back and see it again. It is about a boy in high school who is gay, and he hasn't told anybody, and then people start finding out. It's really, really good, and made me cry a lot both times, even though I knew it was coming the second time. Definitely something that I want to own, and I really highly recommend pretty much everybody seeing it. It's so good. It's amazing. But anyway, so I finished binding this off in the movie theater, and I hadn't intended on going to the movies that second time. The first time, I don't remember what I worked on, probably the string band, but the second time I hadn't intended. My best friend and I were getting together to put up some shelves in her room, and then I was talking about this movie, and I was like, oh, we should go, and she was like, okay, we can do that instead, or first. So we looked up the times, and there was one happening a half hour later, so we were like, okay, movies it is, and we went to the movies, and all I had on me was this, and my black socks, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And I didn't really want to work on the black socks in the movie theater because there is just a little bit of patterning to it. And I didn't want to drop a stitch on a black sock in a dark movie theater. So I finished the bind off on this, and then all except the corner, because to do an I-cord bind off, I don't know how everybody starts it, but I always start it with like a Judy's Magic. No, not a Judy's Magic. Maybe more like a Turkish cast on. Something like that. I use a provisional, so this was a 3-stitch I-cord, so I had 3 live stitches just waiting provisionally at the end. So then I had to graph those together. So I didn't do that part in the movie theater, but I got to the end, and this is the corner. This is where I was last week. So I finished the border, and then bound off in the movie theater, and all I had were the black socks. So my son asked if I would make a hat for the baby too. So I just went ahead and cast that on in the movie theater using the green from the blanket. I was going to do kind of like a string band, and then so I did the ribbing. I cast on in the movie theater. I did the ribbing. I started just doing garter stitch back and forth, and then I was like, do I really want to put a string in a baby hat though? Because depending on how long this fits the baby, it could be a choking hazard. So I opted not to, and in the parent pickup line later that day, I started doing decreases flat, and then I actually tried to do it in the round, but the needle cord that I was using was not long enough to magic loop nicely, so then I just went back to doing it flat. I did the decreases, and I normally don't make I-cord because I find it tedious, but this was like 3 inches of I-cord with worsted on US 6 needles, which is what I made the blanket on, and then for the hat, and it wasn't that bad, and I thought it was a cute little feature because I like the baby hats that have the little loop at the top. I think those are really cute. I've just never made one before. So I did the loop, and then I used the tail to seam up the back or the sides or whatever using mattress stitch, and I had slipped the stitches on the edge, so it's a visible seam, but I don't think it will be This is the inside of it. I don't think it will be a problem, or that could be really cute as a detail on the outside. Maybe let's see if I can push that I-cord through. Probably not, but I'm gonna mess with it because now that I see it like that, that's actually really cute, and I can just trim the tail. Who knows? I haven't decided. Maybe next time I make it, I will intentionally make this on the outside because I'm sure there will be a next time. So yeah, that's the little baby hat, and I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out, especially since I didn't use a pattern or anything and cast on and knit a lot of it in the dark. And then it's getting toward the end of the month, and anybody who has watched my podcast before knows how it goes, but I will fill in anybody who might be new. The end of the month gets a little less. The first podcast of the month is usually a ton of works in progress and maybe 1 or 2 finished objects. And then as the month progresses, I finish a lot of things, but don't add in new works in progress because I like to challenge myself every month to do somewhere between 5 and 8 projects, depending on the size of the project and the difficulty and things like that. So now we're getting into works in progress, and there are less. But that's fine, right? So first up is the socks that I was telling you about, and I'm in the middle of a needle, but that's fine. This is how far I was last week, and I didn't do a ton of work, but I did a little. So this project has been going with me to the gym, and I have been working on it. One day I worked on it the entire time that I was on the treadmill, but usually I just do a few rounds during the cool down on the treadmill, which is 5 minutes. Not, a ton of work at the gym specifically, but I do like to have it just in case I forget my book, which happened one day, or whatever. I find trying to read while I am steadily decreasing my walking rate is a lot harder than just knitting while steadily decreasing my walking rate. I don't know why that is. It just is. So anyway, I have these socks going on the Knit Picks Red Wing Blackbird colorway. I'm almost to the leg. I want to get it to this joint right here on my middle finger. I find that's a pretty good length for socks for myself and the recipient. And also that's about where you start the foot in the pattern. So I am working across, and you can kind of see the texture pattern. I actually did the cables incorrectly. I thought I was doing them correctly, but they don't look like the cables in the picture. So it could be reader error. I am not going to say that the pattern writer was incorrect in how he explained how to cross the cables. And since they're both the same, it doesn't really matter. I will probably make the pattern again in the future, not the super near future, but in the future, and try crossing the cables a different way. But I do like how the effect is going. I think that the moving ribbing is working out really well. That sentence sounded really weird in my head. I don't know if that made sense. But yeah, I'm almost finished with the leg, and then after the leg, it will pretty much fly because there is a little more cabling detail down the foot, but then it's just ribbing after that, which I could do in a movie theater in the dark. I just can't do cables in the dark, although I can do cables while walking on the treadmill. So maybe someday I'll be able to cable in the dark. Probably not. I don't think that's a skill I'm ever going to have, but we'll see. Did I say that this is How Come That Blood by Adam Kaczynski? I feel like I probably didn't. So that's what this pattern is called, and it is a free or payable pattern on Ravelry. Let's see, what else have I been working on? I actually only worked on this project a very little bit. This is the Undercover by Jessie, and I did 4 rounds this week. Part of this is because over the weekend we went to Kentucky. Well, I didn't go to Kentucky. My kids went to Kentucky, which means that I had to drive to Ohio twice, once to drop them off and once to pick them up. So that's with stopping for food and gas and everything, like 6.5, 7 hours round trip each time. So that's a lot of time that I couldn't knit. And then driving makes me really tired. So pretty much those days I didn't knit at all. And then it has been a surprisingly busy week here. I have had something to do almost every day so far this week. So I just didn't have as much time to work on this project. Also, it's not a project I carry around. It lives in this basket. So I sit and watch an episode of something and knit on it. So the only knitting that happened on it was last night. But I do really, really like this pattern. And now that I have a lot of my smaller projects finished, I'll be focusing on this more, obviously, because the only things that I have left for this month, I think, are that pair of socks, which is going to zoom off the needles, this blanket, darning a pair of socks, which will take me an evening because there are, each of the socks need to be done darning on the pads of the foot and the backs of the heels. So that's 4 different spots. So that'll be an evening. And then those 3 projects. And then, well, let me give you the specs on this really quick. So I have now moved it to 2 size 8 knitting needles, and I'm doing it, 2 circ style of knitting because it was getting pretty bunched up on the cord that it was on. So it's growing. It's not quite a throw size yet, but it is getting closer to the size that I want it to be, which is good. The center was made using Caron Big Cakes in the Cookie Crumble colorway, and then the border color number 1, I guess, is Caron 1 pound in off-white, and then I will be using Caron 1 pound in the gray for the actual border. And it will probably be seed stitched because I just think that's a really nice finishing with an Icord Bind Off. I really like that for blankets. I don't know why, it's just my preference. And then, so the last project that is on my official works in progress is the Even Star. And I put in a progress keeper on this one too. So it doesn't look very impressive when you just look at how many rows I've done. However, if you take into account that every round is almost 600 stitches, I think it's just over 550, that's a lot of stitching. So this is the Even Star. I am on, I want to say I'm definitely on chart 3. I want to say I'm on round 34, which is just under halfway. I think there's 71. So I'm coming up with a problem though. And my problem is I only have this much yarn left of this color. And then I have a black lace. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Probably finish out this and then just switch into the black lace and then figure out the border after that. I'm not really that worried about it. It's a shawl. It'll be beautiful whatever I do. So that's where I am with my yarn. This is Classic Elite Silky Alpaca Lace, color number 2458. And I bought this like 6 years ago. So I'm not going to find the same yarn in the same colorway, I'm sure. It's fine though. I will make it work. I don't have a problem with make it work situations. I think that's totally fine. It looks a little bit like yarn barf right now on the needles, but someday when it's blocked, it will be gorgeous. And this will be my biggest lace piece to date. So I don't do a lot of lace projects. I do lace weight projects. I do a fair amount of lace weight or lace knitting and knitted lace, both. But I've only done maybe 2 other lace weight projects. I have been working on other things other than just those 3. Those are just like my active projects. I told you in the first episode that I have projects that I work on weekly, and I totally forgot to tell you about them last week, or tell you about the one that I was working on last week. So I actually pulled this 2 weeks in a row, and right now it just looks like a really weird sphere, but it's actually a Christmas garland. And I put on 2 hours of work, which is about, I think I did 10 beads, so it might have been more than 2 hours. So knit the beads, sew them on, stuff them. That all takes about 2 hours to do, 8 to 10. I will unwrap it a little bit. This is how much of the garland I have left to cover. And I would really like to have it finished this year, so even if I don't pull it again multiple times, by, I'm thinking in November, I'll put this on my list of things to finish, because it's really not that much. These beads don't take a lot of yarn or a lot of time. It's just that I don't love knitting them. There's nothing wrong with them. And I'm using all sorts of scraps, all different colors, variegated. I do have some in here that are fingering weight held double, but mostly they're worsted or Aran weight scraps. And occasionally something a little bit lighter will hop into there. But this is Christmas garland. I don't know if I even have a project page for it. I got the idea from a vintage knitting pattern book. The book itself wasn't vintage, and it was just patterns based off of vintage patterns. And they had a knitted necklace, and I was like, oh, that would be a really cute Christmas garland. So I've been working on this for, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. Just don't work on it very often, but I really want it done this year because I'm finishing up painting and decorating the living room, and I just think that having this garland around the ceiling would be really cute, because this is where we keep our Christmas tree. Actually, right where I'm sitting is where the Christmas tree goes in its life. So yeah, I would just like to have this to hang this year. And in a random picking of the random number generator, I also picked up another Christmas project, which long-term viewers might remember from a few Christmases ago. This is an advent calendar that I started for my kids a long time ago. And when I did it the first year, I sewed the tree, well, I pinned the tree onto the muslin. And then I sewed the tree a little bit every day and sewed on a new ornament every day, and then put in a note from Santa to my kids. So this is made out of, the tree is made out of an old sheet that I used to have. I think I got it early in college, and then after pets and children and general living in the life, my sheet ripped. So I had this fabric, and that's what that is. And this is an old shirt. This fabric is a remnant from a skirt that my best friend made in college. And then all of the rest of the pockets are just random fabrics that I had around. And then there's a little star on top, because on our Christmas tree, my mom had an ectopic pregnancy, and she went to a ceremony where they released balloons, and they all got a little star. So on our Christmas tree, we have that little star every year. So I put a star on top of that, and now I am going back and kind of quilting it down with these little stars. And I put in an hour of work on this, but again, I want this done by Christmas. So I'm just going to work on it an hour here and there as it comes up, but I'm thinking I'm going to keep it next to me wherever my current crafting position is, which right now it's in the living room, but sometimes it's in my bedroom. So I'm going to keep it next to me and try to put in 15 minutes a week on it, in addition to the hour that I'm working on the work in progress. That's my tentative plan. I'm not committing to that because life happens, but I would like this finished by Christmas, because wouldn't it be so cute hanging on this door for an everyday thing? Just a little fun thing for all of the kids to do. So what I have to do still on this is quilt this down. I have this other corner that needs to be quilted down, and then the top third approximately still needs to be quilted down and then put on the binding. And I don't know if I have fabric for the binding. I feel like I have to somewhere, but I don't know if the binding will all be one fabric or if the binding will be several scraps of fabric sewn together. We'll see when I get closer to that. It probably won't be for a while. However, I am kind of thinking of just starting the binding across the bottom, which is finished, and then working my way up whichever side I start quilting down next, so that I don't have to do all of the binding all at once, because I fail when I have to do all of one thing all at once. It's just too much for me personally. Oh my gosh, did you just hear Molly's snore? I love when she snores. She doesn't do it very often, but when she does, I'm just like, that's my little girl. And then I also have the modular project that I'm going to talk about this week. And next time you see it, it will definitely be very different, because I haven't worked on this in a long time. All of March. I don't know if I worked on it in February even. These stripes right here, where it's all crazy, these were put in every day that I did my advent calendar. I did a swap with my friend Haley, and we each gave each other mini skeins. She gave me 25 and I gave her only 24 because I thought that that's how we were doing it. But this year I'll be giving her 25. So she gave me 25, and the way these stripes are working is each yarn is used for a multiple of 5 rows, except for, I don't know how many rows are in this initial triangle. So make the initial triangle and then repeats of 5 up the side, so that I can make sure that all of the strips are the same length, because they're all the same width, they're all the same stitch count. And I'm probably going to have to make a bajillion of these, and this is going to take a long time because this is low priority finish. It's for me, it's not for anybody else. And I only use yarns that I really, really like in this one, whereas some of the other ones I just use whatever yarn as long as it fits the parameter. I only want to use yarns that I really want to remember. Does that make sense? Because sometimes I make a project and the yarn is fine, but it's not like I could take it or leave it as far as in a blanket. But I am going to, after this podcast today, put in a significant amount of work on this, because I do have some yarns set aside to go into it, and I really just want to work on it. That's usually how this blanket goes. I just work on it in a pretty long span, or like, that's not how I want to say it. I usually knit a lot on this blanket at one time and then don't touch it for a long time, because I just like to accumulate the leftover yarn and just knit on it. So, yeah, that's my bias stripe blanket. I do have one full strip finished. I can't remember if I'm making them the length or the width of my queen size bed. I don't remember, but that's, so this is the second, and again, this is going to take a really, really long time, but I'm fine with that. I don't expect my scrappy blanket projects to be finished quickly. In general, I don't expect blanket projects to be finished quickly. I am challenging myself with this throw blanket, though, to finish it by the end of the month, so hopefully that'll be a thing. Last up is my reading list. So I picked this up for the drive to Ohio. It is Wonder by RJ Palacio. I'm sure they tell me how to say it on the discs and I just didn't listen. So this is actually a really, really good book. And it is a junior fiction novel, but I really, really enjoyed it. And it takes place in 5th grade, but 5th grade is the beginning of middle school. And the main character is Augie. He was born with 2 different things that just basically make his face very, very strange. And he's had multiple surgeries and stuff. And he was homeschooled until this year. So he's going into middle school, which is the worst. I didn't like middle school when I was in middle school. I still don't like middle school now. So he goes into middle school. He looks deformed, for lack of a better word. And it's just all of those struggles, and it talks from the viewpoint of many different students, most of them in his class. And it's really, it brought up a lot of really good conversations between myself and my nephew, who is in 7th grade. He read it a few years ago, and yeah, it just brought up a lot of, it was a really good conversation starter. It shows a lot about how your perception of somebody based on how they look doesn't necessarily translate to who they actually are. And we had a lot of discussions about how he behaves in middle school and how I behaved in middle school and things like that. So it's a really good conversation piece. I really enjoyed it. And I also got these 3 playaways from the library. They're all by the same author, and they all have something to do with this story. I don't know why or what exactly, because I don't read the backs of things, but I saw they were all based on, or they all had, I read enough to know that they go along with the story, and they're all pretty short. This was 8 hours and 12 minutes, and this is about 2.5 hours. This is about 3 hours, and this one's 2 hours. So these will be really quick. I'm going to listen to them in the parent pickup line as I knit. And hopefully the shorter stories are just as good as the full-length story. And I'm looking forward to it being expanded upon. It was a really, really good story so far. Obviously, not quite my reading level, but still an enjoyable story. And I like to read all sorts of books at all sorts of reading levels so that I can kind of curate a library for my kids and be able to talk to them about things that they are reading too. So highly recommend Wonder for sure, and probably the other 3. So that's what I'll be reading. That's all I have for you today. I hope you made something fantastic with your sticks and string, and I will see you next week. Bye.